The cold hit harder in poverty. It wasn't just the snow biting at your skin. It was the emptiness in the cupboards, the furnace that coughed out nothing but silence, the long stares your child gave you when you promised things would get better. Caleb Monroe had made that promise too many times, and every day it felt more like a lie. That morning, his truck had coughed to life only after he whispered a prayer to no one in particular. He hadn't eaten since the night before. There was barely enough gas to get him to the interview in Ridgetown, let alone back. But he had to try, again. For Ellie. His 8-year-old daughter had wrapped her scarf around his wrist before he left. "It's my lucky one, Daddy. You'll get the job today." "I know it." He'd kissed her forehead, smiled and said, "Then I won't take it off until I come back with good news." The interview had lasted all of 9 minutes. They needed someone younger. Someone more current with equipment. The manager didn't even bother to look up from his tablet as he told Caleb, "We'll keep your resume on file." That file was a trash bin. Caleb had seen it. The drive back home was quiet. His stomach growled. Snow fell in lazy spirals across the cracked windshield. Ellie's scarf, pink with little clouds stitched on it, hung from his wrist, a reminder of yet another broken promise he'd have to explain when he got home. And then the smoke. A thick black plume rising just ahead on the road, stretching into the sky like a scream. He slammed the brakes. Tires skidded fishtailed. His truck stopped just shy of a line of other vehicles, drivers out of their cars staring toward the ditch on the right. That's when he saw it. A yellow school bus flipped on its side. Crumpled metal. Shattered glass. Fire crawling across the engine hood, licking toward the rear. Screams, high-pitched, panicked, echoed from inside. Children. Still inside. Nobody moved. One man shouted into his phone, "Yes, there's a fire. The bus is full of kids. Just hurry." Caleb didn't wait. He threw open the truck door and ran, slipping down the snow-packed slope into the ditch. Smoke burned his lungs as he reached the wreckage. The driver's side was engulfed in flames. The rear emergency exit was jammed. He banged on the back door, pulled with all his strength. Nothing. Inside he saw small faces pressed to windows, eyes wild, mouths open. "Back away from the door," he shouted, hoping someone could hear him. He picked up a rock and slammed it against the emergency latch. Cracked. Buckled. Then finally, clunk. He yanked it open just as flames reached the midsection of the bus. One by one he pulled children out. Some crawled. Some screamed. 2 were unconscious. He carried them, cradled against his chest like Ellie had been when she was born. The heat blistered his skin. His coat caught an ember and began to smolder. So he went back. And then he saw them, twin girls trapped near the front. One had her leg pinned under a seat. The other clutched her sister's hand and sobbed. Caleb didn't think. He climbed in. He tore at the seat with raw hands, groaning as metal bent beneath him. He freed the girl and slung her over his shoulder, grabbing the other by the arm. The flames were almost at their feet. He ran, stumbling, shielding them with his body as he leapt out the back door just as the front of the bus exploded. The blast threw them into the snow. For a moment, everything was silent. Then applause. Gasps. Sirens in the distance. He opened his eyes. The girls were crying, but they were alive. He felt his jacket smoldering and rolled to snuff it out. Someone ran over with a blanket. Another with water. He couldn't hear much, just the ringing in his ears and the pounding of his heart. One of the girls looked up at him and whispered, "Thank you." Caleb swallowed hard and nodded. He didn't have words. Just tears. The snowstorm softened the sirens. Caleb sat on the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of antiseptic and smoke. Steam rose from his jacket where melted snow hissed against the burned fabric. His hands were raw, knuckles scraped, and a shallow burn on his forearm throbbed with each heartbeat. But he barely noticed. He watched the paramedics swarm around the children, watched 2 of the girls, the twins, get lifted onto stretchers. They were crying but awake. Alive. He didn't know why, but that felt like enough. Then he heard the click of expensive heels on frozen asphalt. Slow, deliberate, purposeful. He turned his head, blinking against the haze, and saw her. A tall woman in her late 30s, wearing a long dark coat and leather gloves, was walking toward him like she didn't feel the cold. The wind caught her dark hair, tossing it behind her shoulders, but her eyes, green, sharp, wet with tears, never left his. She didn't speak at first. Just stood there, staring at him like he was something she'd only seen in dreams. Then, you saved them. Her voice cracked. She knelt down before him, cupping his scraped hands in her gloved ones, as though he were the one who needed comforting. They're mine. Those girls. You pulled them from the fire. Caleb swallowed, uncomfortable with the attention. Yeah. They were trapped. I couldn't just. I'm sorry. Her eyes filled again. I'm talking too much. No one else moved. Not one person. But you didn't even hesitate. Caleb shook his head slowly. Would have done it for anyone. That made her smile. A sad, disbelieving kind of smile. She reached into her coat and pulled out a card. My name is Vivian Hartley. My girls are Lily and Lauren. But I'm not just grateful. I'm indebted. Please, call me. He looked at the card. Embossed gold letters. Hartley Holdings. Sounded like something expensive. I'm not asking for anything, he said gently. They're alive. That's what matters. But Vivian didn't leave. She sat beside him on the edge of the ambulance bumper, the wind blowing silence between them for a few seconds. Where are you from? She asked softly. Northview. About 10 miles up. She blinked. That's the rough side of town, isn't it? He gave a short laugh. That's putting it nicely. Are you married? No, a pause. Wasn't built to last. And your daughter? She asked. You have one, don't you? I saw you muttering her name when the paramedics were working on you. His voice thickened. Ellie. She's 8. Smart as hell. She's all I've got. Vivian nodded slowly, then stood. I need to get to the hospital with the girls, she said. But I'll find you, Caleb Monroe. You saved my world. I intend to return the favor. Before he could protest, she leaned down and kissed his forehead. Her lips were warm. Her tears left a drop on his cheek. Then she was gone. That night, back in his apartment, Caleb tucked Ellie into bed. She traced the burn on his arm with a tiny finger. Does it hurt? He smiled. Not anymore. Did you get the job? He hesitated. Sort of, he said. A different kind of job, maybe. She giggled. Told you my scarf was lucky. She didn't know he'd left the scarf in the ambulance. That it had melted in the heat of the explosion. But he didn't tell her. He believed in magic. In lucky scarves. In heroes. And tonight, maybe for the first time in a long time, so did he. Caleb blinked, sure he'd misheard. Excuse me, he said, drying his hands on his jeans. Vivian stood there, poised but nervous. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed a storm behind the calm. I meant what I said, Caleb. You saved my daughters. I owe you more than I can ever repay. And this isn't just about gratitude. She stepped into the apartment uninvited. The space was small. Peeling walls, second-hand furniture, toys scattered across the threadbare carpet. But she didn't flinch. She looked around like she was trying to understand something deeper than just poverty. Ellie peeked out from the hallway in her pajamas, blinking at the tall, elegant woman now standing in their living room. Vivian knelt and smiled. Hi there. You must be Ellie. Ellie nodded, clinging to Caleb's leg. Vivian turned back to him. I know this is sudden, insane even, but I'm not asking you to say yes right now. I've done things I'm not proud of. Lived in a world where everything could be bought, even love. But when I saw you, burned, bloodied, dragging my girls out of that inferno like your own life meant nothing, I saw something I haven't seen in years. Goodness. Caleb stared at her, stunned. You don't even know me. You're wrong. I do. I know exactly who you are because no man who wasn't pure at heart would have gone into that fire. He shook his head slowly. This isn't a movie, Vivian. You're rich. You've got a whole other life. I'm just this. He motioned to the cramped space around them. She stepped closer. That's not all you are. And I'm not who you think I am either. Her voice cracked. My husband, David, he left us 2 years ago. Drugs. Women. He emptied out our accounts and disappeared. I've been trying to hold everything together for the girls. To show the world I'm strong. But the truth is, I'm exhausted. And when you carried my daughters out of that fire, I saw the kind of man I always wished their father had been. Silence fell. Caleb didn't know whether to comfort her or to ask her to leave. He was used to pain, his own, but this felt like borrowing someone else's heartbreak. Finally he sighed. I appreciate what you're trying to say. I really do. But I can't marry someone out of pity or gratitude. That's not love. I'm not asking for love, Vivian whispered. I'm asking for a fresh start, for both of us. They sat at the kitchen table as the afternoon wore on, sharing quiet truths over instant coffee. She told him about the foundation she'd inherited, about how lonely it felt to be admired but never known. He told her about the accident that ended his construction career, about raising Ellie alone while applying for jobs no one wanted to give a man with old scars and no degree. The hours passed. Something softened. Not quite romance, but something warm and fragile. A tether of understanding. When she stood to leave, she handed him an envelope. I don't expect an answer now, she said. But open this when you're ready. She left with a soft goodbye and the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air. That night, Caleb sat at the table long after Ellie went to bed. He stared at the envelope for what felt like hours before finally tearing it open. Inside was a cashier's check for $250,000. And a handwritten note. Not payment. Not charity. Just a chance to breathe again. Say yes or don't. But either way, you deserve this. Vivian. Caleb's breath caught. David Hartley stood in the doorway like a ghost from a nightmare, gaunt, eyes bloodshot, an expensive coat hanging from his frame like it belonged to someone else. There was something too calm about him, like a predator that had already chosen its prey. Caleb stepped forward, shielding the doorway with his body. Vivian said you were gone. David smirked. And she said yes, didn't she? That's what she does. She rewrites the story to suit her guilt. I don't know what you want, Caleb said. But you're not coming in. David's smile faded. She gave you money, didn't she? She thinks money can fix everything. But I know her better than anyone. She's not offering you a fairy tale, Monroe. She's buying your silence. Caleb tensed. Silence for what? David's eyes glittered. That bus didn't catch fire because of chance. The route was diverted last minute because the regular driver was fired. Replaced by a kid who didn't know the roads. Know who made the call? He tapped his chest. Me. I did it to screw a subcontractor she hated. And the brakes? Weren't even checked. Caleb's stomach turned. You're lying. David leaned in, voice low and sharp. Am I? Ask her. See what she says. But let me make something clear. You marry her, you marry the mess. All of it. And you'll spend the rest of your life watching your back. He turned and walked off like he hadn't just dropped a bomb. Like he hadn't just shifted the earth beneath Caleb's feet. That night, Caleb sat in silence while Ellie colored at the kitchen table. His heart warred with itself. He could take the money. Accept Vivian's proposal. Give Ellie a life she'd never dreamed of. Private schools, a safe neighborhood, warmth. Love maybe. Eventually. But what if it was built on something rotten? What if David was telling the truth? The next morning, Caleb drove to the children's hospital where Vivian was curled up beside her daughters, asleep in the chair. She looked human for once. Not elegant, not untouchable. Just tired. He waited until she woke. And then he asked softly, what really happened with that bus? Vivian paled. I need the truth, Caleb said. No more fog. Tears formed in her eyes. David used to manipulate everything. Routes, contracts, even school board votes. I only found out after the crash. I didn't know, Caleb. I swear. But if I speak out now, Hartley Holdings will fall. My daughters will lose everything. Caleb's voice was gentle. Then maybe they never had anything real to begin with. The next week, Vivian stood at a press conference, trembling as she confessed everything. The mismanagement, the contracts, the negligence. Caleb stood behind her not as a husband, but as a witness. David Hartley was arrested 2 days later. The check? Caleb tore it in half. But what he earned was greater. Respect. Freedom. And slowly trust. 1 year later. Caleb stood outside a modest brick home. Not a mansion, not a penthouse. But it was theirs. Paid for, repaired with his own 2 hands. Ellie ran in circles on the lawn, her laughter chasing the wind. A silver car pulled up. Vivian stepped out in jeans and sneakers. A far cry from the woman in heels who once stood at his door. I brought lunch, she said. And a proposal. He raised an eyebrow. This time, she smiled, it's for a real date. Caleb grinned. Let's start there.